Welcome to the Military Transition Podcast, Human Resources Pathfinders Series, where we share invaluable human resources, career insights, and HR tips and tools tailored specifically for the veteran community. I'm your host, Misty Moreno. I served in the Air Force for 20 years and retired in 2020. I'm the marketing manager and content creator for Vets2PM, and I mentor veterans just like you through the military transition. In today's episode, we have the privilege of hosting Dan Fiore. Dan is an up-and-coming HR professional with a year into his first role at Radian Group, Inc. He served in various roles in the U.S. Navy for 6 years and made the transition from the Navy into HR in 2023. In his current role as a People Operations Coordinator, Dan supports enterprise-wide people transactions that impact the candidate, pre-hire, new hire, and overall employee experience. He has also led projects and contributed to process improvement initiatives, including creating job aids for his team, supporting various internal audits, and managing transactions on the company's internal employee website. Dan is passionate about helping veterans seek employment and adjust to their civilian life. He is also motivated to help businesses improve processes to attract the best talent and create better employee experiences. Join us as we explore Dan's journey from the Navy to HR, his experiences and insights in his current role, and his dedication to supporting veterans and enhancing HR practices. Let's dive in. Welcome, Dan, to the show. I'm so excited to have you. I'd love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely, Missy. Thank you for having me. For those that don't know me, my name is Dan Fiore. I'm currently a People Operations Coordinator for the real estate and mortgage insurance company Radian, headquartered in Wayne, New Jersey, but I'm located out of Cherry Hill, New Jersey, about 25 minutes outside of Philadelphia. I am a Navy veteran. I was in the Navy for 6 years. In the Navy, I did a wide variety of jobs. My main responsibility was a helicopter mechanic, which was a huge transition from that to HR. But I've been in the HR profession now for about a year. Really enjoyed it. Some good takeaways from it. And overall, just happy to be here and tell my story and, share this dialogue.
Awesome. Very, very unique transition from a helicopter mechanic to HR. So 6 years in the Navy. Tell us about how you came about human resources as your post-service career.
For sure. So when I was about 2 years into the Navy, I knew I wanted to get a degree just because of the programs being offered, the opportunities ahead. I'm a big history buff, so I thought about history or political science, something of that nature. But a mentor of mine encouraged me to look at, business opportunities. And I came across HR management, and for some reason, I just felt like it fit me. And the reason why that really came to fruition because the people I spoke with day to day in the Navy, in the fleet, I realized that I really did enjoy helping people, not from like that social aspect, but more so to drive business decisions. Like, for example, helping people submit leave or helping people with career management opportunities. And yes, I was at that more junior enlisted level, but I think getting that experience and that exposure really gave me more of a reason to wanting to, when I transitioned out of the Navy, to go into the human resources profession.
Okay. And so I love the fact that you got your degree, because I actually just did a post about this. One of my big tips for those that are transitioning from the military to the civilian sector is to get a degree. I personally would have been up a creek without a paddle if I didn't have a degree, because all of the positions that I was applying for, and especially my salary desires, required a degree. And so human resource management, in my opinion, is a very versatile degree. So that's really important to outline that. Business administration is very versatile. Human resource management is very versatile. And when I talk about versatile, from an HR perspective, it's easy for recruiters and for hiring managers to apply that versatile degree to the role that they're trying to acquire, a person for, in order to kind of see if they are a good fit. So human resource management. And so you you leave the Navy. So why don't you share a little bit about, why did you leave the Navy? So after 6 years, a lot of us separate or retire prior to having to. I'd love to understand, maybe why you left the Navy, and that will help us with your civilian journey.
Yeah, and just to touch briefly on the grief factor, I could not agree more. I felt like having my degree and a veteran really had that combination to where I could interview with several different companies. Now, I do think that there has been more challenges to getting a degree while you're in the military, just due to requirements, time in, things like that. But I would recommend anybody that's still in, and while I was in, to at least start pursuing a degree. Now, in regards to my transition out, the work I did in helicopter maintenance was critical, of course. Without us, the pilots cannot do what they do every day. There's always safety concerns. People could, like, not to be morbid, but people could die. So it's really critical to the function. But I think after assessing that and seeing where my strengths and talents lied, I felt like that was the better route for me, was to get out, continue pursuing education, use the VA for benefits and opportunities, and really just make an impact, as a civilian, and serve where I could in some capacity.
That's awesome. So obviously every veteran will experience some sort of obstacle, some sort of challenge, as they make the transition from the military to the civilian sector. And so I'd love to hear about any sort of surprises or obstacles or challenges, anything that basically made you say, oh crap, what did I do?
So I really appreciate you asking me, because, when I was transitioning, I felt pretty confident, pretty positive that I was, doing the right thing. I was networking, I was getting interviews, I had the certifications down pat. And it really wasn't until I started my job when it just hit me, like, Dan, you need to take a step back, man. The go atmosphere, environment that you come from the military, it's just not like that in the outside world, and that's okay. That's how things should be. And I think experiencing that for the first time was really hard to, comprehend and really adjust to. And then just with personal relationships too, with family and friends, is just, I was fortunate because I got to see people over the years, every, like, a few times a year. And even coming back to that was really tough. Like, you don't realize how much you change, and also how people around you still look at you the same way, and are trying to, understand, your changes, and how they can be supportive of you. So I would say just work and relationships were, like, probably the most challenging things to adjust to as I was getting out about a year ago.
So when you first started your HR civilian career, what are some things that took you by surprise, or, that, made you think, okay, I am prepared, or I'm not prepared? You said certifications. What specific certifications do you have? Or, share with us your kind of your first few months in the civilian HR career field.
Yeah, no, definitely. So the first thing, certifications, I did see the value in them, and luckily, in the military, sites like Navy Cool really break down, like, why it's important to get those certifications. And the same with the Air Force as well. They have Air Force Cool, I believe.
Yeah, and Army Cool and CG Cool.
Oh
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, they're changing along the way, but we still have good opportunities out there.
No, I could not agree more. And with Navy Cool, I was able to really narrow down, like, what certifications would be helpful for me. So I really dedicated myself to the SHRM CP at first. Actually, it's a little crazy to say this, but when I was deployed, I had my laptop and I downloaded, like, all the SHRM study material, because my goal was, when I got back, I would give myself a few months to relax and, cool down a little bit, but I was going to get the SHRM certification by the end of the year. And fortunately I did. I don't know how that happened, but
Okay.
I think that's a really good certification to get. And then I looked at the HRCI certifications as another tool, just to build my resume a little bit more, give me that leg up, if you will. So I I thought to myself, I think the associate PHR would have been a good start since I wasn't like in the profession yet. So I went with that first. And then when I got my job at Radian, I think what I really struggled with was just understanding that, it's okay to like take a step back and relax. Because in my environment, the Air Force as well, any branch, you know, getting qualified, certified, and your day-to-day tasks was critical because then you could move on to the next thing, and then the next thing, and next you're a supervisor, and then you're leading a team of airmen or sailors.
Yeah.
And in my job or in any other civilian profession, it's just not like that. You
Always,
really
yeah.
have to learn the culture. You have to learn your job. You have to learn, your team functions. Who to go to, who's good at this, who's good at that. Rely on your manager for things. Relying on independent folks throughout, your work center, your company,
Yeah.
if you will. I would say those were the biggest challenges for me, just like understanding that and realizing that it's okay, to take that step back and really assess, yourself and realize that you just came from a completely different world, essentially, and that's okay. That's a part of the experience. It's a part of the journey. And so that's really where I would say I struggled at first. Now, coming out of that experience, I felt like it really polished me to where like now I can talk to veterans and people that are transitioning out of the military, and just give them that piece of advice and tell them like it's okay to take that step back and assess your surroundings and also the company too. Like, is it a good fit for you? Are you going to be able to thrive in that environment? Are you going to be able to grow too out of these? Because that's a part of it too. It's not just about getting a job. It's also
Yeah.
about how you feel about yourself along the journey. So
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
Yeah, it's good. And you mentioned, so SHRM and HRCI, two credentialing authorities for human resources, and the APHR and the SCP are actually very similar as far as the level, right? So we're looking at entry level, mid level for APHR and SHRM SCP. And people always ask me, what is the difference? And honestly, they're just two credentialing authorities that offer human resources certifications. And when it comes to, well, which one should I choose? Which one is the most, value added? And I would say, I don't think you should look at it that way. I think you should look at, the exam content outlines. Which one do you believe that you will be able to work with the most? For me, certifications are all about getting a quick win for veterans, right? Meaning we want to validate our experience, and then we want to be competitive when it comes to the job search. So certifications are usually preferred requirements. They're not always basic requirements. They will set you apart. So I don't think people should get wrapped around the axle about which one to go, to go with. I went with both. I'm the same. I have SHRM SCP, and I also have APHR, and I have PHR. I wrote curriculum for HRCI, but if SHRM asked me to write curriculum, you know what I mean? So it doesn't really matter which one. I just think that it's important to validate your experience. So
absolutely.
Yeah. And I appreciate you sharing, when you get into the civilian sector, I do believe that it depends on which industry you go into, because I went into manufacturing for human resources, and it was go, go, go 24/7, 4 shifts, 12 hours a day for those shifts. And so, I was on call, and I had to come in at all hours in the morning and the night. And so it seems like maybe your industry is a little bit slower. So it really just depends on what it is you want from, your life post-service, right? And so Absolutely. It seems like for you, you're enjoying the ability to slow down, to go fast, slow down, to learn about the culture of the organization, the people that you work with, and then also what opportunities are available. So when it comes to growth, because you said you want to make sure that you can grow in your career. I tell veterans, take your military transition 1 year at a time. And when you get into a job, look at it for, this is the year. What am I going to do for this year? So can you give veterans some advice when it comes to, taking your transition 1 year at a time and looking at the position from just a 1 year bird's eye view?
Yeah. And before getting into that, the certification thing kills me every time, because I was asking that question, and through Veterati, the mentoring site that I'm a part of as well. I get asked that question all the time, understandably. And I say the same thing because both are very important. Getting both is great. I honestly, I was really nervous about the SHRM, but once I was like in the exam, I felt like a lot of it was common sense, and also just really taking the time to study like the SHRM BASC and really like absorbing what they look for out of their SHRM professionals. And then the HRCI was a little more intimidating for me, to be honest, because it's very specific to HR, the HR function. And I'm just not there yet. So that was a little intimidating at first, but luckily had that under my belt as well. And I think just everyone that's getting out just needs to, really assess like that it's okay to get one, both, or, it doesn't matter in the end. So,
yeah. And personally, I will tell you, I personally believe that SHRM SCP and HRCI APHR, they're identical. They're just from different credentialing authorities. They mean the same thing. So personally, I would start with an entry level and then go up, right? But that's up to you. The more certifications you have, the better off you'll be, but not necessarily to get a job, to get a promotion. It just means the better off you're going to be for your knowledge, skills, and abilities. So.
Absolutely. No, and another area I just wanted to go back on real quick is just on figuring out what is okay for you. And I think that is probably one of the most difficult things for veterans across the board. Because for years, whether that's 4 years or 20 years, you're basically told, hey, this is what you're going to do every day. This is what you're going to wear. This is how your hair should look. And then you get out and it's like, okay, what does Misty want? What does Dan want to do? And that's a hard question, and that's hard to really think about, which leads to growth. And I feel like growth, growth personally, I think should be assessed in quarters or, months.
Love that.
And I think for job, it should be a year, that first year, unless there's a layoff or something, that first year in your job should really be focused on just learning the company, the culture, the people, what we do. In HR especially, I think that's important because not only do we handle the processes, but we also have to know what our people around us are doing, and like how can we make not your lives easier, but also how can we drive those business decisions? How can we move those strategic objectives forward? So I would say learning the job in that first year is really important, and the company. But when it comes to that personal growth and that opportunity to really expand, you should assess it within 3-4 months. I will tell you, I'm a different person today than I was in December. I'm a different person. Yeah, it really has to be blocked out because I feel like your transition goes in phases, and it keeps going on. Like there's never really like an end point. So then I feel like once you hit that year mark out of the military, then you can really start looking at like maybe like longer like stretches. Like, okay, this year I felt this way. How do I feel about my company? How do I feel about myself? Things like that. So that's just what I would recommend for growth.
Yeah, I really love that tip. And that's actually how I attack my growth and development. I actually do it in quarters. And the one thing that I learned quickly when I went from the military to the civilian sector, because I went from military HR to civilian HR right away. The one thing that I learned quickly is that the business changes quarterly. Right? The business needs and the business desires and the people around you, literally the people around you, people leave, right? They come and go, changes. And so your approach, your processes, your procedures also have to change. When I first came into the job, the number one question that I asked my stakeholders, the people that I worked with, was, how are we going to work together? And what do you need from me being your human resources business partner or human resources specialist, whatever it is. So I love that you do that as well. And when it comes to growth and development, usually your organization will determine what you need to know, right? So if you're maybe dealing with a litigation, then you're going to grow and develop in that area, or you're dealing with employee relation issues, good or bad, right? You'll grow in that area. So can you share with us some of your resources? What are some resources that you utilize right now in the civilian sector to grow and develop your knowledge, skills, and abilities?
Yeah, no, I think that's really important. Because the world that we live in, whether we're employed or not, is always changing. And I think we're seeing it rapidly increase. ChatGPT and AI are like the talk of the town, understandably, because we might all be robots might be working one day. Just kidding. But I think it's important to really understand that like you have to change too, and you have to be able to adapt to the change. And I think one of the benefits being a veteran coming out of the military is we were so used to like that rapid pace of change. So we, have to do the same thing as a civilian now, as a veteran, and also helping out our business too. Understand that like change is just a part of the process. When it comes to opportunities to learn, though, I would say I'm fortunate in my company to where there are a lot of stretch opportunities. I am challenged often to, really pick up new responsibilities. I think it's just a part of the culture, which is I'm really grateful for.
Yeah. So why don't you explain for people that don't know, stretch opportunities? I know that term, but not a lot of people understand what stretch opportunities mean. So why don't you explain that? You said your company has lots of opportunities for you to kind of stretch your role. So what does that mean to the veteran?
Yeah. So and this is just in my words. I don't have the definition for it, but I would say just an opportunity to take on a new project, or hey Dan, you're doing really well in this area. I'm going to give you this responsibility, and it may seem like someone's like throwing things at you or throwing things off their plate toward you, which is partially true. But at the end of the day, it gives you that opportunity to really learn something and grow. And you might come out of it a different person in some aspects. A different professional. And just like in the military, I think we get stretch opportunities all the time. Like in my realm, when I was in the aviation space, you would have the mechanics that were actually out there like doing the jobs, and then you would have inspectors, assessing the work. And your stretch opportunity in the military would be going from like that mechanic to that inspector. So I would say, for veterans that are coming out, transitioning service members, they should look at their prior experiences and how, in a way, it does translate to, that civilian stretch opportunity that you might receive at your company.
Yeah, and there's always opportunities, especially in the civilian sector, but we hear a lot of chatter about, oh, this is my job description, and if you're going to ask me to go outside of my job description, then I should be paid more. But, I always say be a gap filler. Be a gap filler. Take on a stretch opportunity. If you see a need in the company, go ahead and fill that need. And why? Job security, baby. Job security, because the more valuable that you become, the more valuable the company is going to know that you are. And so they're going to want to keep you around, right? So I always say job descriptions are what?
No, I was just saying I love that. It's so true. It's so true.
Job descriptions are parameters, and you get to decide if you want to stay inside your job, your description, fine, go ahead and do that. That's within your right, as long as you're fulfilling your roles and responsibilities, right? But if you want to be, really like value added to your company and someone that, that other people look towards in order to get stuff done, then you have to be a gap filler. And I think that's a really good way of putting sort of what stretch opportunities are. Sure, people delegate, whatever, but, I always say to myself, like, what can I learn from this? If I receive this task and it's not necessarily within my realm of, responsibility, but I just, what am I going to learn from it? What new skill and what new ability will I develop? So any resources that you, besides your company, any other resources that you utilize?
But so I would say I use LinkedIn Learning a ton.
Yeah.
And I know that's a little pricey for folks, understandably. But then when it comes to HR specifically, I would say I use SHRM and HRCI. Another site, HR Brew, really helpful for like understanding what's going on out there in the world. of HR. Morning Brew as well is another good one if you want to pick up
Yes.
what's going on in the business world. And I say that because you can navigate and figure out like, okay, like how could this impact my job, responsibilities, things like that. Also, it makes you question, what type of skills do I need to move on? And if you don't mind, just to jump back real quick to what you mentioned about the job description, that was another just culture shock for me coming out of the military because, I was junior enlisted. So every day it was like, okay, hey, Dan and team, go do this because of my rank tab. Whereas, now it's like, Dan, what do you think about this? How can we improve it? And, it took me some time to really like absorb that. But then when I looked at areas of my current work and, how can I improve them? I feel like it gave me that confidence and a little bit of that, understanding that there's more, you can add more to the job description than what's like right in front of you, and really brings value to your team, yourself, and the organization ultimately. So definitely
Absolutely.
a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. And once you get into your civilian HR role, look for opportunities when it comes to, your job description, as far as stretch opportunities. And then, when it comes to your growth and development, quarterly come up with what knowledge, skills, and abilities do I want to learn this quarter that will help me with what I'm currently doing. So if you're working on a project for maybe a new shift schedule or a new policy or a new procedure, there might be, a new skill and ability that you have to develop. So look within your company. And then I always say, look at what you're already paying for. So I pay for LinkedIn Premium because, LinkedIn Premium assists me with, my job, whatever it may be. And so, yeah, look at what you're already paying for, because LinkedIn Premium comes with tons and tons of classes and learning opportunities. But even YouTube Plus, I have YouTube Plus as well for, my job.
Right.
There's lots of different things on there. TikTok, IG, Facebook. I mean, if you really, really, look in the social media platforms, you can learn a lot about different things that will help you with your job. So it's always important for us to grow and develop. So thank you for sharing those resources. And yeah, you mentioned SHRM and HRCI. So if you do have certifications, your credentialing authority, you most likely have a membership if you paid for it. And SHRM, I will tell you, SHRM is, they go in above and beyond for their, for their HR professionals. So they have policies and procedures that you can download a template for, lots of different things. So
I would mention too, and something that I thought of earlier, just came back to me. Another resource that isn't on the web, and it depends on your location and how you feel, but really building your social capital too, I think is really critical. Networking. I think it's really important
to do that. Say it again. One more time.
Networking! Exclamation point.
Yes. So for our listeners, networking is important.
Yes. It just, I don't think people understand just the power of it, because you can also learn from outside your company too, from people. What's going on in their world, what type of skills they're developing. And in some cases you can bring that back to your job. You can help build that up for yourself. It's just another tool that is traditional, but is still going to be effective in any type of environment or world that we're heading into. So
absolutely. And I can tell you just from personal experience, number one, me and you are talking because of our network. So Cindy, our mutual connection, connected us, and that's why we're talking. The DoD Skill Bridge program, I received that internship opportunity through my network. Continental is through my network. Vets2PM is through my network. And every other opportunity that I have and that I've had is through my network. So, the 3 steps that I always tell veterans, as far as how to work on your military transition now when you're still in the service, make the military a part of your life, get some hobbies, and then build your community around you. And so your community is all about building that network. And you mentioned too, like when I worked at Continental, I would always lean on the organization that I did my DoD Skill Bridge on. Like, so I worked at Thompson Construction Group for my DoD SkillBridge internship. And we would always talk and be like, hey, what are you doing for this? Especially during COVID when OSHA was coming out with that mandatory vaccination, blah, blah, blah. Like all of us companies around the Sumter area work together to try to figure out what are we going to do. Now, of course, there's things that you can't share with outside people, but you definitely can lean on your network for, hey, what do you think? Is this a good idea? What are you guys doing? And sort of get on the same page. So that's good. Dan, as we kind of wrap up, I just wanted to ask you, you knew that human resource management was something that you felt like your knowledge, skills, and abilities aligned the best with. But not everybody, has a clear kind of vision on what they want to do, what they want to be when they grow up, right? Or when they leave the service. So, my 3 tips are always to, make the military a part of your life, get some hobbies, build a community around you with different perspectives. What would your tips be for someone that is thinking about separating or retiring and maybe looking at HR?
Well, the one thing I will say before I get into that is I wish I talked to you in like 2021 because the hobbies part I was lacking in a ton. I was too focused on school and the things in front of me, which helped me transition. But I think I didn't appreciate like what I enjoyed and what I love about life, or what I look for. So definitely, I think that those 3 tips are great and extremely helpful. But to answer that question, I think, it's as simple as like assessments, online assessments. I know ONET offers a ton of resources that you can look at for like a profession, what type of skills you need. Even going to your career center on base, that's a little bit more of the, I hate to say this, but a little bit more of the old school route. But that is helpful to at least determine, what you could do when you get out. And then also just asking your chain of command for like resources. They should know. They should know about cool U.S. maps, some of the other resources that are available to the transitioning service member to dictate, what type of certifications they can get out there, what career path they need to get there. So those would be my recommendations. And then lastly, personal note as well is to remember to have fun as well and to have those hobbies, because you can really burn yourself out by like not taking that step back and really assessing, not just your career, but also how your life is going to change, so.
Yeah. And we talk a lot about the military transition, but really what you were discussing throughout the entire podcast is the military transformation. So the transition has a lot to do with the logistics, right? It's the resume, where you're going to live, what you're going to do, how much money do you need to make, health insurance, life insurance, all that stuff. That's part of the transition. In my personal experience, I believe that every service branch sets us up for success when it comes to the transition. They have a checklist, they have a class, and in my opinion, if you're physically and you're mentally capable, then you have the resources, because we are in the veterans are supported era right now. Everyone before us has made sure that we have what we need, right? But the mental transformation, is the piece that sets people back a little bit. But that's why I always say, while you're still serving, you can make your career a part of your life, not your entire life. That doesn't mean that you're not living up to your military roles and responsibilities, but that does mean that you're getting some hobbies. You're figuring out who you are outside of the military, right? Outside of the uniform. And then you're building a community that has civilians too, not just your military network. And you can do that at any time in your career. So I appreciate you.
Could not agree more with all that, especially just with the transition itself. I think the VA and just veteran community, there's so many challenges still that have to be tackled, of course. But I am so grateful for, the veterans from like the Vietnam era, the greatest generation that really had to struggle to get those rights and get those benefits for us today. And I think because of that, I was, super motivated and knew that I was going to be set up okay. That I did have the resources in front of me, and not to pull a negative turn here, but I just think there's too many veterans out there that are super negative about their experiences and how the whole system is just destroyed. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of areas for reform. I'm not going to disagree with that, but I just think we have such an advantage over the regular civilian population to really make a career and a successful life for ourselves. So I think the transition it's what you make of it. It really is. And then the transformation comes along with it. And it's the same thing. You can take it one step at a time where, you could approach it the same way as you did in the military. So,
yeah. And honestly, if you look for the good, you will find the good. If you look for the bad, you will find the bad. Right. And so, I mean, not only Vietnam era, but like Gulf War era, just in Afghanistan era, in Iraq era, I mean, we have what we have now because other people didn't, and they fought for us. Because the one thing that you'll find is that when people take off their uniform, they're still a Marine, an airman, a coastie, whatever at heart, right? A soldier at heart. And so they want to make sure that everybody else after them has what maybe they didn't have. And so it would be super rude and disrespectful of us if we didn't take advantage of what we do have available. And it seems like you really took advantage of that. And I believe that an optimistic attitude will get a veteran, a lot further than witching and complaining about what's going wrong and what I don't have, And so I always, whenever someone, is super negative towards me or maybe comments negatively on my posts and stuff like that, I just put them in my prayer book. I pray for them, and then I move on, because I do believe that there's a lot more optimistic veterans than there are negative veterans, So I'm really glad that you shared that. It seems like your optimistic attitude has helped you, and you're taking advantage of everything. But there are some negative things out there. So as we wrap up, we talked about some good things in the HR career field. And so we do want to obviously share with veterans why they should go into HR. But why don't you share just a few things that, will help people decide if HR is actually for them? Not negatives, but maybe some things that people aren't realizing. Because I will tell you, I talk to people all the time that say, oh, I'm a people person. And I'm like, are you? Are you really?
I have a mentor through a local association in New Jersey, Tri-State HR Management Association, and paraphrasing it, I was butchered every time, but my mentor through it told me that he's heard that too, and essentially said, "Oh, well, at a funeral home, you can find people there too, but they're not really going to talk much to you back." Because I was the same way, and I think a critical component of being in HR is to have that people appreciation. Like you do have to have it because our work, our processes are around human capital. So I think you have to at least have the empathy and the appreciation for people, but it doesn't mean, that you have to be like a social worker either, because at the end of the day, you're protecting the business first. And I don't want to say not the employee, but the business is going to survive longer than that one single employee. So I would say going into HR, I think you should at least have that mindset that you're not always going to get to yes when it comes to people. There's going to be situations that I have not dealt with yet. I will be transparent about that, but that others may deal with where they have to lay off 30 people, hundreds of employees. People that have been there for a lifetime, essentially, that dedicated time, energy, money to the company, or a disgruntled employee or several disgruntled employees. You might be in an environment where, you have to deal with the same, people that you might have dealt with in the military, in some capacity, and, being able to help them too at the same time and being confidential about doing that. So I would say those particular areas, like specifically around people, you should really just watch out for.
Yeah.
And then just with business processes too, as well. Just realizing that at the end of the day, yes, you are an HR professional. Yes, you are helping people, but you're also first a business professional. So, it comes with pros and cons to it.
Yeah, that's such a good way of looking at it. I mean, there's diamonds and warts when it comes to every organization. There's diamonds and warts when it comes to every role and responsibility, and there's diamonds and warts when it comes to every career. And I always, like, my husband and I, we've been married for 19 years, I think. It's so long, I can't even remember exactly how long, but we always say that the reason he probably wouldn't like when I said that, but the reason why we have survived, right? You have to put it that way. I mean, when you're with someone for so long, but the reason why we are where we're at right now is because we choose to focus on the 80%, because a lot of people focus on the 20%, right? And they get divorced over the 20%. And when it comes to your career, especially human resources, you really do have to focus on the 80%. There are going to be employees that you're just not going to reach. There's going to be managers and executives that are not going to listen to you. They don't want you at the table. And so that's why, when people ask me, hey, Misty, do you recommend that I get into HR? I always ask people, what is your purpose when it comes to work? What's your purpose? So my purpose is to develop better human beings who develop better human beings. So I can do that anywhere, but I specifically can do that in HR, project management, lean operations. Those are the roles that I've had. So anyone who's thinking about coming up with what should I do post service, first think about your purpose, and maybe that will lead you to HR.
100%. And like in HR, it is like a floaty, shiny object out there. That does sound appealing because you're not, dealing with all the business things, but you're dealing with more of the people. However, I think it's the opposite. And like you just said, finding that purpose for, any field, but particularly HR, is really important. I think it continues to drive your career forward. Like for me, early on in my career, but I feel as if my purpose is helping employees do the best that they can, creating better experiences for people at the company, but also protecting the company so it can do the best it can and deliver for their employees as well. So I think having that is critical, and without it, you're going to have a really hard time to navigate your career if you want career progression.
Yeah, that's good. All right, so we're going to wrap up, and I just want to kind of recap a couple things for, veterans to take away from this episode. So some things that I heard from you, you were a maintenance professional in the Navy, right? And then you turned HR, but you started your journey when you were still in the Navy. And so you looked at, getting a degree in human resource management was a field that you thought, hey, a lot of the knowledge, skills, and abilities and desires that I have translate well to the HR career field. So you went that route. And then you also validated your experience with a professional certification, such as the HRCI APHR. And I also heard, mentor, you got a mentor. I also heard veterati, which means that you're mentoring and you probably, also use the service as well. And then it seems like throughout your time in a civilian company, you're taking advantage of some stretch opportunities, some career development, professional development, and really leaning on your colleagues and your managers to assist you. And as an HR professional, just like there's, diamonds and warts in anything that we do, it looks like you're, grabbing onto your purpose and you're taking that with you throughout your, your career at your company, and you're focusing on the 80%. Does that wrap it up, Dan?
I would say it's 80%. No, just kidding. No, it's 100% accurate. And I'm really grateful, to tell my story and some of, my experiences in HR, and, to help out veterans when I can, because I've heard this time and time again, and I've told other transitioning service members this. We're all in this together. No one's better than another person. Everyone has had their own challenges. However, we can give back in some capacity to those that really do need that help, and help them to figure out what they want in their next career or next life, if you will. So again, I just really appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah. All right. So rapid fire questions. You ready? So let's help some veterans out. All right. So what's the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
So it's pretty simple. But I remember my first day in the Navy on the ship, like USS George Washington. I was, little fish in a small pond, Navy reference there. I actually lost my ID on my first day.
You lost what?
Just my ID, which is, it's your life basically. Luckily, I found it. Someone found it later. But I remember I was talking to my supervisor, who was great, and I was super stressed out and just kept apologizing. But he told me one simple thing, which is every day is a new day. And I have to admit, I still feel that way today. I think every day comes with challenges. You're not always going to have your best day, but I think, moving forward, thinking to yourself, hey, tomorrow's a new day. It's one reason to get up in the morning. So I would say that's the best advice I've ever received.
All right. So is there a self-help book or any sort of book that has changed your life, or maybe the way that you do something or approach something?
Yeah. So when I was in the military, I really got into hiking and walking long distances. So I became an audiobook person, and Atomic Habits was at the time, I thought, for me. However, I still had time in the military to grow and develop. So I don't think that was there yet for me. However, over the last year, I've gotten really into the work from Dory Clark, in particular, The Long Game by Dory Clark. I think that is a really helpful book, especially for those that want that long career trajectory, and realizing that you can have short-term wins now that really translate into long-term success. So I would say that for me is probably the most inspirational book that I have read, as an adult. So.
That's awesome. All right. And what's one daily habit that you practice that moves the needle when it comes to success in your life?
I would say for that, reminding myself that, to be hopeful and grateful for, my experiences. There's a lot of negativity out there. There's challenges in our own lives. We're not always going to meet that mark or that goal. We're not always going to have the best relationships with people, but I think having hope in yourself and those around you is a daily habit and a reminder to myself, to continue moving forward, and that you're going to overcome it. So
great. All right. Any last words for those who are looking at human resources as their post-service career trajectory?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, just Daniel Fiore, would be happy to reach out to you. Same through Veterati. And if I can help in any way or point you to the right person, would be happy to assist you with. And lastly, again, just want to say thank you, Misty, for this opportunity. Really happy to share my experiences, and hopefully there's HR professionals out there, transitioning service members that are looking toward this next step as a positive opportunity. So thank you.
Well, we appreciate you, Dan. Thanks for sharing your experiences and helping the veteran community within Vets2PM.
Thank you for tuning in to the Military Transition Podcast, Human Resources Pathfinder Series. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dan Fiore and gained valuable insights from his journey and experiences. If you found today's episode helpful, please share it with your fellow veterans and friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode filled with more HR tips, tools, and career advice tailored for the veteran community. We'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, feedback, or topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to reach out to us. You can connect with me, Misty Moreno, on LinkedIn, or visit our website at vets2pm.com/training for more resources and support. Until next time, stay motivated, stay focused, and remember that your military experience is a powerful asset in the civilian workforce. Keep pushing forward on your career path, and we'll be here to guide you every step of the way. Take care and talk to you soon.